All right. If I asked many of you about what sort of sex ed you received when you were teenagers, it might generally boil down to some version, more or less, of this, right? But maybe not so easy to laugh at. And while a lot of our sex ed, not just what we get in schools, but also from parents, from online, may still consist of sort of absolutist, fear-based prohibitions, much more common now and palatable are sort of what I think of as soft power appeals to individual liberty and self-interest and choice, right? So we tell people to make healthy choices, proud choices, smart, safe, and satisfying choices, informed choices, because making choices will keep you safe and allow you to control your future, because your future is your choice, and so is your freedom. So choice, it's like it's a superhero power or something, right? It's magic. And I am pro-choice, both in the sort of reproductive rights slogan way, but also in general, right? Team choice. But I'm also concerned and very disturbed that in a sort of Foucauldian sense, we've substituted a discourse of choice for actual material possible options. So choosing is good, but it's only as good as the accessibility, the desirability, and the viability of the choices in front of you. We talk to young people about their sex lives as though their futures, their choices, are some sort of wide open field. And occasionally we talk about it as though it's like slightly more constrained, like which of these pleasant paths through the woods will you choose, right? But if you listen to young people, some young people in particular, right, and you ask how they see their choices, what they see ahead of them, and what things look like from their perspective, I think it may look a little more like this. And actually, for some youth, more like this. And so instead of talking about the bad choices that young people make in their sex lives, I want to talk about the bad choices that young people are offered. For instance, most of the ways that we talk about youth sexual choices are what I would call just world choices, right? They start from this pretense, this neoliberal pretense, that we're masters of our own domain, and that it's ultimately on you to protect your own future. Never mind that the quality of public education is going down, the expense of college education is going up, stable and sufficient employment options are disappearing, and discriminatory, exclusionary practices, both explicit and implicit, continue to operate uninterrupted, and I would argue maybe even now emboldened. But we still tell young people, and I think because we honestly want to believe, right? Because truly there is sort of proven psychological dividends to system justifying and just world beliefs, right? We want to believe that if you apply yourself, if you show discipline and ambition, and you make right, good, smart, responsible choices, that nothing, especially sex, would get in the way of your dreams of changing the world and like of becoming an engineer. There's a whole series of billboards all about like not letting sex stop you from becoming an engineer. Because in our supposed post-prejudice meritocracy, the only thing you have to fear is making bad choices. And as our cautionary tales to youth make clear, bad choices are indeed to be feared. Drinking too much, trusting too much, as though these are the things that are going to ruin your life. Not that institutionalized and interlocked racism, misogyny, economic injustice, xenophobia, ableism, transphobia, heterosexism, widespread environmental degradation. Never mind those, right? The girls and women that are featured in these cautionary tales, because they are usually girls and women, serve as victim-blamed and slut-shamed scapegoats and decoys for system injustice. And they permit us to maintain our faith, both in ourselves as masters of our own destinies, and in our environment as the best and fairest of all possible worlds. But of course, a single moment of critical attention to the situation of young women makes it painfully clear that for girls and women, there is no right sexual choice. They're caught in a double bind of sexual choices, shamed if you do, shamed if you don't, mocked if you don't court male desire, and blamed and degraded if you do. This occurs in our formal systems, so police departments, those are quotes from the DOJ's review of Baltimore City Police, and in our informal communities, so Twitter, right? These are by regular misogynist trolls, but also are not so regular ones. And young people are also, I would say, presented with Cinderella choices, right? Of course you can go to the ball after you do what cannot be done. So yes, abortion is legal, but in a shrinking number of states and communities, under a shrinking number of conditions, particularly if you are young, and with a shrinking number of protections, both legal and physical. And of course, if our new Congress has its way, it's not just access to abortion that will become a Cinderella choice, especially for poor women, but contraception, testing, prenatal care, basic sexual and reproductive health care will be unaffordable and inaccessible to women and men. I also think a lot about choice when it comes to consent. And I wonder how to include the stories of some of the young women that I've worked with in studies, for whom yes was less an enthusiastic choice than a forced one, and a sort of foregone conclusion given their conditions. This includes Stephanie, who is a young 16-year-old woman in foster care. She was in a study that I conducted with Dr. Nicole Fava. So Stephanie had a boyfriend, who was Lawrence, who she saw on the weekends. He was 20-year-old with an apartment, a car, and a stable job in a town in which those are not guaranteed things. And when we first asked her if she'd ever performed fellatio on anyone, she responded with an unequivocal and simple, like, oh no, that's nasty. But then over the course of the interview, right, and she started talking more about her past relationships, and this is an interview about sexual experiences, and she also started talking more about her relationship with this guy, Lawrence, and it ends up she does go down on him. She doesn't like it, but she chooses it, sort of. As she shared, sort of little by little, she was like, well, I did it because I don't want to lose him over something stupid. And it isn't the worst thing in my life. And given everything else that she shared in her interview, she was right. It wasn't the worst thing in her life. And she said, so I do it when he's absolutely needing it, so he doesn't go into a breakup mode, so it doesn't turn into a really bad argument, because I can't afford to lose him. And when Stephanie says, I don't want to lose him, and even more to the point, I can't afford to lose him, she means it. She's right. This wasn't some kind of romantic, lovesick declaration, right? She wasn't like some sort of self-sacrificing martyr. It was a calculated assessment of her options, looking at her future, aging out of foster care, no family or community ties to rely on, dim at best academic and employment prospects. This guy, the one with the job and the car and the apartment, who said he loved her, but occasionally coerced her, it wasn't her dream choice, but it was the one that she had. And if we're concerned about that, and all the red flags that we see, and I think that Stephanie sees, right? She was not an idiot. Then we ought to work harder to get her better options, not just teaching her how to say no, not figuring out how to see when a guy is right for you, but actually giving her direct, independent access to material, emotional, physical, and intellectual resources and prospects so that she can afford to lose him and so that she has real choices. So I've got a problem with the kind of magical thinking about choice. I think it's a really deceptive discourse. But not only because it pretends that there are plenty of good choices to choose from, you just have to be smart enough, but also because it automatically condemns risk-taking as one of the bad choices, maybe the worst choice. But I want to think through that a little bit, because in other domains of life and development, we get that risk-taking is a good thing, right? It's the engine of development and growth. We prod it, we encourage it, we applaud it. And we understand that mistakes and adversity, they stimulate learning and resilience. We wouldn't dream of restricting kids from some forms of risk-taking, right? In fact, infringing on developmental rights is tantamount to abuse. But we also, it's not like we just disregard child safety, right? We have car seats, we have bike helmets, we have soft rubbery turf at playgrounds, we lock up poisonous cleaners, right? We baby-proof the house. Because children are going to fall, they're going to get into messes, and accidents are going to happen. And we accept that as adults, it's our responsibility to provide kids the tools, the support, and as safeguarded and non-toxic an environment as possible so that their missteps and their misjudgments are not catastrophic. But somehow, when it comes to sex, this good sense just goes completely out the window. And we deny youth, some more than others, access to information, to support and services, even the ones that we as adults use and benefit from. And we chastise them for experimentation, even though research tells us, and lots of research, that experimentation is what leads to relationship and communication skills and the self-awareness that actually enable good choices that we so desperately want young people to be making. So, as a caveat, right, I'm not a Pollyanna when it comes to youth sexuality. In fact, my entire research program is focused on just how treacherous and toxic things are for young women. But the point of my research also is that interventions that target young people or sex are missing the point. Being young and being sexual, being a girl, those are not wrong things. Those are not inherently dangerous things. Sex is made dangerous when it's embedded in social injustice. And that's what we should be aiming to change, not teen sex. And if we're truly dedicated to ensuring the healthy development of all youth, if we want them to make smart, healthy, responsible choices, then we need to stop offering them bad ones, false ones, and fake ones, and forced ones. As vaunted as it is in American ideology, choice is neither guaranteed nor magic. It is hard-won and must be well defended.